We're going to be in Genesis 34 and 35 for the most part, but we're going to start in 33:18. Genesis 33 and 18. This is one of those accounts that when you're teaching little kids Bible class, you just don't teach this one. You just skip it and move on. So we'll take a look at some things that happened in their lives and some things surrounding this occasion that I think are pretty telling about the future of Jacob and his family. But beginning in 33:18, after Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. So Jacob has a spot in Canaan that now belongs to him. He's bought it and paid for it. And it is close to what will later be known as the city of Shechem, probably named that because of Hamor's son, Shechem, who's going to be kind of the main character in chapter 34. He was kind of an aristocratic son. Hamor was very well off, had plenty of money, was the leader of that family and that city. And as a result, his son behaved himself in ways that he ought not to have, and his dad tried to bail him out of it by offering to pay for whatever damages. So let's get into chapter 34 and read down to verse 12. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the field with his livestock, so he did nothing about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk to Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing which should not be done. But Hamor said to them, "My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us, give us your daughters, take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us, and the land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, acquire property in it." Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift which I am to bring as great as you like. I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife." So Jacob and his family are new to the area. They're new to the culture. But this is a universal insult. This isn't something that anybody anywhere would have counted as a good thing. But the insult is not seen as being an insult against Dinah. The insult is against the leader of the group. It's against Jacob. His sons will also take it as a personal affront to themselves. But nobody seems too worried about Dinah in this passage, do they? That tells you a little bit about the place of young women in that culture, in that time frame. As far as Hamor was concerned, and as far as Shechem was concerned, it could be bought out. Whatever he had done, all they really needed to do was pay for the privilege. And so he would just take this young woman for his wife as long as they paid the bride price. Now, the bride price could be anything that Jacob decided. He could come up with whatever number he wanted to, and according to customs of that area and according to later Jewish law, that was perfectly all right. And I want us to run over and look at one passage from Deuteronomy 22. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy 22. And And just look down at verse 28. Now, by the way, if you've got the stomach for it, read all of 22 sometime, and it won't make you happy. But 22:28 says, if a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and he rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her, and he can never divorce her as long as he lives. That's the whole rule. So the young woman not only has been violated, but if the man will pay the 50 shekels of silver, he can buy her, in fact, he's forced to buy her as his bride, and can never divorce her. Now, from the man's standpoint, that seems like a punishment, right? You violated my daughter, so you pay me 50 shekels of silver. That takes care of the offense, but you can't ever divorce her. So you always have to take care of her. She always has to live with you. How many would vote for the privilege of getting to live the rest of your life with your rapist? So again, the women, the young women of that time, were not considered, their opinion was not considered, their needs were not necessarily considered, not in local culture and not even in the law of Moses. There was some protection given. She had to be cared for. You couldn't just cast her out. Most women of that age could not have fared well on their own. It was built around the idea that they would be married. So somebody has to take responsibility for this young lady. You can't just get rid of her, but at the same time, pay the bride price, pay the money, and just keep moving on with life. Now, I want us to notice a change in leadership. Go down to chapter 34, verse 13, back to Genesis 34:13. And notice how this conversation unfolds, right? Shechem has told Jacob and Dinah's brothers that he'll pay whatever the price. And I noticed this. I don't know if it dawned on you. It took me a minute to come to grips with it. We start out with, he raped her. The next thing we see is he was filled with love for her and tenderness toward her. And then when he talks to his dad about it, he wants nothing else than to have her for his wife. So there's a mixture of this horrible act with some kind of tender longing for bringing her in as his wife. Okay, 34:13. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, we can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all of your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we will take our sister and we will go. Do you notice the dynamic here in the family? They come and tell Jacob that Dinah has been violated. Jacob does nothing until his sons come home. When Hamor and Shechem come to meet with the family, Jacob does not give the answer on behalf of the family. The sons do. So the sons decide what is appropriate for the way their sister has been treated. And by the way, Shechem and his family are lying. All they really want is to take over Jacob and all his stuff. We'll intermarry with them, they'll become like us, and eventually we'll just own all their stuff. So they have an ulterior motive. Jacob's sons also have an ulterior motive. They have absolutely no intention of intermarrying with Hamor and his offspring. I went back to make sure I had it straight in my head. Dinah has 6 older full brothers. Okay, she has 2 other brothers in her sub-clan. So you've got 6 brothers that were born to Leah and 2 brothers that were born to Zilpah. Right? So Two brothers that were born to Zilpah. So you've got 8 sons on Leah's side of the family. Okay. Dinah is the last child born to Leah herself. So she has 7 kids. And then Zilpah has 2 more. So there's 9 of these kids, 9 of the 14 that we know of, that belonged on Leah's side of the family. When they come and ask what they should do, the answer seems to have come from Dinah's older brothers. Okay? Not just her brothers in general, but the oldest brothers within the clan. Let me run down and find this real quick. Verse 25. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain from their circumcisions, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and their herds and their donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all of their wealth and all of their women and children, taking as plunder everything that was in the houses. So from the Israeli side of things, from Jacob's side of things, this is a great victory. Right? An enemy defiled our sister. We took revenge on them. It makes the plot for a great old Western. You know, we're going to hunt them down and we're going to kill them all. And when they do this, they do exactly the same thing that they're fighting against. Did any of these women have any choice? No. They were just property. They were just chattel. So when they go and they attack the place, they bring back not only goods, but also humans. And they bring them back to their camp. So in a sense, Jacob's sons win a great victory, and in another sense, there's just a moral vacuum that is surrounding this entire episode. Now, the 2 brothers that start the fight, that go in and put them to the sword, are Simeon and Levi. Somebody conjure up real quick, who's the oldest son of Jacob? Anybody remember? Reuben is the oldest. We don't know where Reuben was. Reuben does not take part. He's not the leader in this thing. Sons number 2 and number 3. 2 and number 3 of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, are the 2 that take action and do something. I have absolutely no idea from the text where Reuben might have been or whether he was part of that group that went in and plundered afterwards. I kind of take Joseph out of this mix because I think he was still pretty young at the time. I don't know exactly how old he would have been, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He wouldn't have been very old. We're still waiting on Benjamin to be born, so we've got 10 of the 12, well, we've got 11 of the 12 tribes already born, but probably only 10 that would have been old enough to be part of any of this thing. Jacob gets angry about this. This was not his idea. This was not what he wanted. He wanted to blend in and get along. He wanted to settle in the region. He wanted things to just go smoothly. He wasn't really wanting to start a fight with the neighbors because there were not as many of Jacob as there were of them. Now think about Jacob's personality so far. When he was coming back, what was he worried the most about after he left Padan Aram? What about Esau, right? So he's a little shy about getting into conflicts. Big physical conflicts are not Jacob's thing. He ran away from home to get away from Esau. He was afraid to get back with Esau. Now he's got, there's not much left of the Shechemites, but he's got other people of that region who now are going to think badly of him. But the brothers reply, and this is a great quote, "Should we let them treat our sister like a prostitute?" Doesn't that sound like a big brother? We're not having it. We're not putting up with it. We don't care what you do, Daddy. We've got this, and we're going to take care of it. And they did. So later on, we'll see that separation, that unrest between the sons and their father just gets amplified when Joseph gets old enough to have a relationship with his dad. It is this same group of guys, the older sons of Leah, who are the ones who strip him of his clothing and dip it in blood and, tell their daddy that he's dead. It's the same bunch, because he is the oldest son of Rachel. So he is the most beloved of his beloved. And they're not above doing whatever they have to do to ensure the power base of their side of the family. So Leah's sons will kind of show their heads again later on when we get to talking about Joseph. All right, we'll run over to chapter 35. Chapter 35, beginning in verse 1. Jacob ends up going back to the area where he saw the ladder going into heaven and where he wrestled with the angel. He ends up going back to Bethel, the house of God. And he's going to end up giving it a slightly different name, but very similar. God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God, the one who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." Hey, what was the deal? When he appeared to him originally, Jacob said, "If you'll be with me and you'll take me to Laban's and you'll bring me back safely, then you will be my God." When he moves next door to Shechem, he makes an altar and he names the place after his God. So now his God is moving him back to Bethel, the house of God, and says, "You go build me an altar over there. That's where we're going to set up camp." So he really has a relationship with the one true God now that he didn't have before. It's getting stronger. It's amplifying as time goes by. So verse 2, "So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, 'Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you. Purify yourselves, change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone.' So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on all the towns around them, so that no one pursued them." So Jacob has been concerned, well, now we've made ourselves a pestilence and people are going to hate us. God took care of that. Everywhere they went, God made sure that the people were terrified of him. And so he just passed right on through. Nobody messed with him on his way to Bethel. Did you notice what he did with all the gods? He buried them. He buried them under a tree. Well, I found that interesting. A fellow brought me a big box of books having to do with the occult. He had been into witchcraft and sorcery and stuff, and he got scared. And so he said, "Can I give you these books?" And I said, "Yeah, bring them to me." So he brought them to the church building where I was at the time. And I took them into my office. I kind of looked through them, and they scared me enough that I put them back in the box. And I took them downstairs and put them in a storage room next to the old furnace, just back in the back. And I have zero idea whatever happened to those books. And I hate to think who found them or what they did with them when they found them. But I didn't want to mess with them. Well, Jacob decides, we're done with all those false idols. We're done with all that stuff. Let's just get rid of it. So he just buries them. What was among the stuff that he buried? Laban's household idols, right? Rachel had to give them up. And so he took all of that stuff and buried it. So now we've got a clean break after all this time. First we were dealing with Esau, then we were dealing with Laban. Now it's just Jacob and his God. They're finally alone. Jacob says, "Let me get rid of everything else." He gets rid of everything else. They clean themselves up. They get ready for their appointment with God. Now, I have not put this in a sermon before. It's not in my book on baptism, but it rings true with all the stuff. And you should read that book. Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. There is a sense in which great newness of spirituality requires a change point. And there's a lot of places in the Old Testament where the change point comes through water washing. Right? There's the ark, right? 8 souls are saved by water, the like figure whereunto baptism doth also now save us. Naaman dipping 7 times in the Jordan. There's different kinds of, the priests had to wash themselves before they could go in and serve at the altar. Well, here, Jacob says what you need to do is get rid of all the old stuff. That's kind of like repentance, right? Clean yourselves up, wash up, put on your new clothes, so we can go and be in the presence of God. So there's that concept of you've got to set aside the old and have a change point where you move into the new. And so that may have something to do with why Jacob required them all to do that. In verses 11 through 15, God reinstates all of the blessings. So he's told him this before, but he's going to tell him again. God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you. Kings will be from among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you. I will give this land to your descendants after you. Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked to him. Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked with him. He poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured out oil on it. And Jacob called the place where God had talked to him Bethel. Now, there's probably an L in front of that, E-L, which means the mighty one or the strong one. I don't know if it's in your translation or not. Some have it, some don't. But the mighty one or the powerful one who is in the house of God, right? Bethel is house of God. So El Bethel would be something like the God who is in the house of God. It's the territory. It's this place belongs to that God and that God alone. So it's a territorial proclamation that he makes. So now Jacob is settled in his place. From that place, Joseph will go out and go to Egypt. From that place, eventually, Jacob and all of his will follow and end up in the land of Goshen. So we've followed Jacob about as far as we can follow him, but there's 2 more things that we need to see before we kind of close him out. Look down at verse 27. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. His sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So they did that together. Go back to verse 16. On their way there, as they moved on from Bethel, while they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. As she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, Don't despair, you have another son. As she breathed her last, she was dying. She named her son Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow, or the son that brings me sorrow. But his father called him Benjamin, the son of my right hand. So he loses Rachel in transit, but he gains Benjamin, the youngest of the 12, and the one who's going to play such a huge role when they finally make their move from Canaan over to Egypt. So, any questions or thoughts about any of that? It's amazing to me to look back at their culture and to see just how cruel it could be, how Old West vengeance kind of things that it could be, where people just fought it out, may the best man win kind of scenarios. And God is with Jacob, and God is with Jacob's family, and everything that happens to Jacob's favor. And we know that, but it's still difficult to see how uncivilized things were in that day and time. And I mean, would any of us put up with that kind of lifestyle in our own lives or in the lives of the people around us. I don't think so. But thank God we don't have to. He takes good care of us, and hopefully we take good care of the women in our lives as well and protect them as best as we can.